Mike LeNeave, welcome to Focus Matters. So excited to have you here. As I often say at the beginning of an episode, this has been building for a while, for months, as a matter of fact. Excited to have you here for several different reasons. First of all, you are the first rotary pilot we've had on the show. So that's really interesting. I can't wait to dig in and really understand the cognitive demands and the differences between flying a helicopter versus we've spoken to a couple of jet pilots and start to understand that domain. But your background's impressive. 23 years in the Army, flying and also overseeing safety and also helping to really guide some of the thinking around how do you do this well, right? How do you create programs that are sustainable and practical over time? This combination of safety and effectiveness in combat has got to be so interesting. You're also a great dude. We've known each other now for a couple of years. I think you have a great perspective, both in the industry as well as from the time that you served. So, first of all, thank you for your service. And second of all, thanks for joining today.
Hey man, thanks for having me on. It's been a little while since we met the first time and ate out of the food truck and that kind of stuff. That was a good
That's
time.
right.
And, we've gone down the path, and you're bringing a technology, or you're in the technology space that absolutely has shaped where I'm looking and where I was going coming out of the military.
Well, let's dive in because there's no time like the present. So, I think of you primarily as a helicopter pilot in terms of your career. Why don't you give us a little bit of the highlights? First of all, how did you get into the Army and how did you know you wanted to fly? Did you know you wanted to fly or were you told one day, hey, Mike, guess what? You're going to fly helicopters. And then what was that experience like? Let's just go for it right away.
Sure, yeah. So I was I'm the son of a long-term military family. So, my grandfather was in the Army. My father was in the Air Force. He flew the Alpha model of the B-52. So that's where I got my introduction into aviation. He used to take me flying and see Cessna 172s, and yeah, it's kind of like where I got the first taste of it. We'd go to the Blue Angel shows. I was born in Pensacola, so I've been around aviation a lot. The Army started to become attractive to me because my brother was in the 82nd Airborne and he was a sniper for the 82nd during that rash of time where we had Panama and the first Gulf War and that kind of thing. Uh, and so I got introduced to that kind of lifestyle, and I was really attracted to it. My sister's in the Florida National Guard actively right now, so we got a lot of military heritage. The aviation thing, I was looking to go to the Air Force Academy and fly some of those jets that you're talking about, but I was not a very good student. So, my father introduced me to the Warrant Officer Flight Training Program. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know that was a thing. And he said, "You don't have to do all this college stuff. You can go join the Army and be a warrant officer." So that started a long progression of trying to get into the military, because when you first go into a recruiting station, they're going to say something to the effect of, well, to be a pilot, you need to be a mechanic first. That is not true. That has to do with anything. That is trying to give you the shield and divert you off of a really difficult process, which is a long flight program, flight packet, and get you into something faster that I can sign you up and send you today to basic training. So anyway, long backstory of knife fighting and getting a new recruiter and that kind of stuff. Got into the Army, got into flight school. Day one of warrant officer candidate school for me was September 11th, 2001. So yeah, so I come out of Fort Benning basic training. I'm drinking all the Army Kool-Aid. I love running around in my camouflage. And then all of a sudden, uh, September 11th happens, and I see gun trucks running up and down the base and what have you. And I came from Fort Benning, Rucker, and I was all in. I was like, man, this is amazing. Look at how cool this place is. But I didn't know that the country was under attack at the
Oh,
time.
wow.
So yeah, so that was an eye opener. We got the jolting speech of, hey, look, if you want to quit, this is the time. But we got attacked today, and we didn't know anything about it. So that started that process, and we went into flight school, and um, I had a real yearning to be. I was mission first, not aircraft first. So a lot of times you talk to pilots, and they'll talk about their aircraft a lot. I didn't really
Right.
care about the aircraft. I wanted to do the mission. So the mission I wanted was reconnaissance, and I really didn't care if it meant riding a bicycle, walking the ground, or flying a helicopter.
Okay.
So reconnaissance helicopter. That's what I started with.
So, two questions for those that are not familiar. For an officer, what is a warrant officer?
Yeah. So a warrant officer is a guy who gets on the quasi pay scale of an officer, gets the treatment of an officer, but doesn't have any of the responsibilities of an officer. So it's kind of
Okay.
like one of those really sweet spot positions. That's joking. Joking aside, a warrant officer is a technical expert, technical, tactical, proficient member of the team. And what the warrant officers do in Army aviation is they are the preponderance of your helicopter pilots. The Navy and the Air Force, I know the Navy was trying to go warrant officer with a little bit of their flyers. I don't know if that ever caught caught steam or not. But in the Army has a low cost pilot provider in the warrant officer program, so they can pay a warrant officer a little bit less than a regular officer. And what they do is they do everything aviation. So a warrant officer will not necessarily be in command of anything. There are some little spots here and there where they can be a company commander or that kind of thing. But for the most part, what the purpose of a warrant officer is for the Army is I'm going to groom you to be a helicopter pilot from day one, and that's what you're going to do your most of your career. And when you get older and you get wiser, we're going to use you to advise the command on tactical decisions, training decisions, or yeah, equipment decisions. But you stay
So
in the
there's a
seat
pathway.
the whole
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So excellent. So the second question. So you say you fly reconnaissance. So you flew the the OH-58D, right? So again, for those who don't know, explain what that helicopter is and what it looks like and what its capabilities are.
Yeah. So if you saw one, it looks like a news helicopter. That's what it looks like. It is a Bell, product, so it was a Bell 7 would be the civilian variant, but there's a little ball on top for, reconnaissance. It was built for the Cold War era, so you're thinking
Mm,
Fulda Gap, you're thinking the Russians coming across the line, you're using the aircraft to mask itself behind terrain, and you're popping just the sight over the terrain. In the late '80s, early '90s, it was a sophisticated piece of equipment because it had glass cockpits and that kind of stuff. But in 2006, 2007, flying in Iraq, you were effectively fighting with a musket compared to the other aircraft. So that's what we did. So what it really made you do as an air crew is when a ground force got a flight of OH-58 Deltas and not Apaches, they really were getting the pilot skill. The pilot skill mattered because the technology was not there. We were way behind on the technology capabilities in that aircraft. A lot of the weapon systems on it were point and shoot Kentucky windage. So you're shooting rockets and you're kind of making adjustments with your feet to make it to get a rocket on target. Really hard thing to do to hit the target with a rocket. That's a really hard thing to do. Um,
I immediately think Apocalypse Now. Is that accurate or
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So the
okay?
OH-58, Alpha Charlie, so the Alpha model OH-58 was in Vietnam, and
Okay.
so was the Charlie model. They would fly single pilot with a reconnaissance scout in the passenger seat, and they did a thing called pink teams in the Vietnam era where an OH-58 unarmed helicopter, so an unarmed scout helicopter would fly low and slow, and a Cobra would fly, 1,500 feet behind it. And as soon as the OH-58 got shot at, it would run out of the shooting area, and a Cobra would
It
come in
was
and shoot.
bait. It was a
Yes,
bait
you were bait.
helicopter.
Exactly, you were the bait.
So what's it like from a cognitive perspective, the first time you're sitting there, you have the sticks, you're on this not cutting edge piece of technology, but you're still flying it in the same conditions, right? Was there a moment where because you said you didn't do great in school, but obviously you were able to rise to the occasion and meet the cognitive demands of piloting a helicopter. Was there a moment where you were challenged by that, or did it feel pretty natural for you?
The transition into flying, I mean, flying, there's a reason flight time matters because you get a thing called air sense. And as you build air sense and as you build familiarity and proficiency inside the cockpit of your machine, things that take a lot of brain power to think through, like, oh, I got to hit the buttons so many times to get to this page to do this thing. it started to become second nature, and especially feeling the aircraft. So a pilot goes in this thing called a cross check, where you're constantly looking at your altitude, your heading, your airspeed, your trim, those kinds of things. These critical components of flying the machine, depending on how precisely you need to fly it at that moment in time. But eventually, what you pick up is you pick up these proprioceptive skills where you can feel the aircraft doing something that is not supposed to do. Maybe you can feel your speed. You can feel. Wait a minute, we're sinking right now. You can start to feel things where it doesn't take a signal or an input to tell you, and you don't have to necessarily double check that signal or input. You're really just flying off of feeling. You become, as they say in flying, the aircraft becomes part of you.
Yeah. Do you think that's unique to the helicopter? Or is it more associated with
I
a
think it's
rotary
you,
engine than a
yeah.
jet?
Well, I think it's aviation. I think
Okay.
all in all, as you get used to performing in the space, in the 3D space, and you understand your machine, you're going to have another like dip and flow as you transition in and out of machines. So depending on how long you stay in one machine, familiarity is going to grow. Specifically with the OH-58, for instance, it's a very difficult aircraft to fly. Like everything is manually flown. There is no autopilot. There's no any of that kind of technologies where I can just push a button and it flies itself. It didn't do that. If you
Right.
took your hand off the
Right.
control, crash, right? Like that's how that
Okay.
works. If you took your feet off the pedals, you're going to more than likely go in a circle, or you're going to, mess up. Um, so you had to constantly fly it, and that's one of the taxing parts of it. And I think that's one of the reasons the technologies inside of it may have been a little less advanced, or a little they didn't invest in them, because for the pilot to do their job, they really have to fly it. They can't get into mission aiming and pressing buttons. One guy's got to fly, the other guy manages the mission.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because the comparison, my understanding, for instance, on an F-35 is that a lot layperson by all standards, but I've heard a lot of pilots say the F-35, especially when you're not in combat, almost flies itself. So there's a tremendous amount of sensory data, but there's a lot of autonomy for parts of the flight. It feels to me, or it sounds to me like you're riding a horse that flies in a helicopter.
Yeah, and I used to, so I was an instructor pilot in the 58 world, and I used to, the first thing I would teach the students or teach the people I was progressing was everything in this aircraft is designed to kill you. So don't don't bring the attention inside. Everything that's going to save your life is outside this aircraft, right? Like you got to keep
Interesting.
your attention outside, and everything's going to try and draw you in between lights and noises and bongs and whistles and bells. They're all trying to pull you in and suck you into the aircraft. And when they do that, your attention is no longer outside. Well, in an aircraft that doesn't fly itself and won't maintain an altitude and won't maintain a heading, you're going to crash. Like you're going to crash into
Mm.
something.
So
So
talk
it's
about
a
that for a minute,
dangerous
because
it's a
that's
dangerous place to be.
well, that's really interesting because I want to reflect on that and see if I'm right. So the closest I can get to that is motorcycling, and what the challenge of motorcycling is that when if very much similar to what you're describing, it is a feel. Right? It's a very kinesthetic experience. You're moving the machine with your body, and as soon as your attention moves away from the mission, in this case, it's finding lines, your attention moves away from it, so does the vehicle. So one of the worst things to do is to get into a turn and then have your attention drift, because when your attention drifts, the bike follows. Is it similar? Is that what you're saying in the helicopter? That if your
Yeah,
attention drifts, go ahead.
yeah, it can be, right? Like, so, oddly enough, if like you're in a car, if you're looking out the window, you have a tendency to drift in the direction you're looking. Well, similar thing, you can drift in the direction, or your heading can drift in the direction. Uh, the more proficient you become, and the more uh, experience you get in the aircraft, the more you start to feel that stuff, right? And you get better at it. Uh, so one of the things that I adopted personally, flying a 58, for instance, in Iraq, was I was known to crank down the friction. So they have a friction on the cyclic. So a couple ways you can fly the aircraft. A lot of guys, they like to have the friction completely off, and then you have this like wet noodle. If someone were to let go of the cyclic, it would just fall into the dashboard. Well, what does that do? That puts you into a 30, 40 degrees nose down dive attitude. And depending on what altitude you're at, you're probably just going to crash. But I would put the friction down. I would crank it to where I had to physically like put a lot of force to move the aircraft so that if I took my hand off or if I got killed, it stays steady. Aircraft just keeps flying and it gives the other guy a chance to grab the controls and figure out what's going on. So, yeah.
Amazing. Let's paint a little bit of a richer picture. What kind of altitude? What kind of speed? So again, when we're talking to jet pilots, it's about speed. It's about maneuverability. It's long distance engagement. That was one of the things that I still have trouble wrapping my head around. Is how far away the enemy is when you first engage in a fourth generation fighter. I assume completely different when you're in one of these.
Absolutely different. First of all, speed, that's relative. The cruise speed of a 58D is like 80 knots. So we're talking what 95 miles an hour or something like that. It's not, I mean, depending on if you had a Corvette or something, you probably outrun a OH-58. But
Okay.
where we made our money was like this. So you don't want to do a cross country, trip in a on a go kart, right? Like you don't want to do that. But a go kart's a lot of fun to drive, right? It's a lot of fun to whip around a racetrack or something. A go kart. That's what a 58 was. Is super maneuverable, really fun aircraft on the target. Getting to the target was painful because sometimes it would take a long time to get there because it doesn't fly very fast. But the altitudes we would operate at anywhere from 10 feet to 1500 probably, so around there.
10 feet.
Yeah, 10 feet.
10 feet off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
Yeah,
what's that like?
yeah, so, we would actually, at least one of the things I would do, I don't like speaking for the community 'cause, again, 58 pilots, they did it their own way, however they wanted to do it, depending on once they got in the aircraft, but my technique, I would like to fly if I was flying low, I was doing it for a reason, and in a place like Iraq, you would need to get really low, in order to mask yourself behind buildings and things like that, so the enemy couldn't necessarily pinpoint where you were at. But one of the things we used to talk about, we'd be doing, 80 knots, 85 knots, whatever, 10 feet off the ground. And if the engine were to quit, right, you wouldn't have time to respond. You're just going to die. It's going to crash into the earth. So we would practice cyclic climbs because that's the only way you were going to respond to that. So the second you felt like anything where it felt like you lost power, because you're going to probably hear it before you necessarily feel it. So you'll hear the engine go, oh, kind of like downshift essentially. You would just immediately cyclic climb. You just do a bump and you gain 300 feet like that because you transfer your speed into altitude. Now you've got time to look around and go, where am I landing? Because I'm landing. That's going to happen. But now I'm going to auto rotate. So the beauty about auto rotating and the beauty about that transition period is understanding the aerodynamics of it. When you lose power, your rotor system is going to lose drive, which means you're going to lose lift. You're gonna fall to the earth. But when you transition into an attitude of a bump or a climb, what happens is you're forcing relative wind into the rotor system, which actually
Okay.
speeds up the rotor system. So you're keeping the rotor system energized. You gain altitude, tip it over. Now you're in a free fall, but you're in a place where you can at least make a decision. Am I going here or am I going there to auto rotate? So
You bought yourself some time. Yeah.
bought yourself some time. This is the difference between helicopter pilots and airplane pilots. Helicopter pilots are usually paranoid about the engine quitting.
You're kidding.
Yeah, because you got to be thinking about it all the time, and it's a maneuver you
I love
practice in
I
flight school.
I love the fact that you said that with such a straight face. Like, the engine quits.
Yeah, yeah. So in flight school, they'll teach simulated engine failures, and they'll teach 180 autos, which are really a fun maneuver to do. And 180 auto is engine quits, you're going this way, and now you need to turn the helicopter around to land into the wind. Because if you try and do an auto rotation with the wind at your rear end or at your tail, you got no chance. You need that relative wind when you go into your decel to keep that energy up. So because you're going to use all that energy at the bottom to cushion your crash, right? But we used to practice it all the time. Like you just be flying along and your instructor pilot would just roll the throttle off on you. And you're like, simulated engine failure. And you're doing all your things. You're getting all your checks in. You're figuring out where you're going to go land. And yeah, just ingrain that paranoia in the helicopter pilot because a good helicopter pilot will not be comfortable.
Well, that's really interesting. So I'm hearing a couple different pieces. First of all, it's a very different sense of vigilance than I hear for other roles, right, in flight. Because what you're saying is that really it's moment to moment. Things, conditions can change in any given moment as long as you're in the bird, right? Is that
Yes,
accurate?
that is very accurate.
And then there's this other piece that's really interesting to hear, this combination of the cognitive demand. You're constantly making decisions, you're constantly adjusting, but you're making cognitive demand or cognitive decisions against kinesthetic inputs. So it doesn't sound like most of your inputs are coming from readouts. So
Yeah,
again,
no,
versus some of the faster moving, modern generation planes, there's so much data. One of the concerns is that the human is becoming the slow point, right? It's becoming the compression point for data because there's so much data being fed. What I'm hearing is most of the data is actually hitting your body. It's this combination of kinesthetic, auditory. I'm listening to the engine. I imagine there's a lot of visual scanning going on all the time. And so that's a lot of demand. First of all, is that all accurate? And then second of all, we'll talk about how do you train for that.
yeah. So the other thing is, so the demand, like the hand flying workload in an OH-58 is unlike any other maybe one or two Army helicopters that can mimic it. Uh, so later on in my career, I transitioned over to MH-47Gs, and I likened that transition to a space shuttle transition. Like I went from an aircraft that was designed to kill me to this thing that is a flying computer that did all kind of amazing things that I literally could press a button and it would do the entire flight if I wanted it to.
And this is a variation of the Chinook. Is that right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, the
So it's also
47,
a much bigger aircraft, isn't it?
huge,
Okay.
massively different type of flying. I mean, literally going from I drive a Mazda Miata to I drive a F-350 pickup truck dually or whatever with a trailer on the back. So I mean, yeah,
Mm.
massively different going through the parking lot, right? The but the workload, you're not wrong. A lot of auditory uh, inputs in a helicopter. A lot of you're going to smell things different. You're gonna see things different. Vibes. You're going to sense vibrations differently. You're going to something to the effect of like, man, my goggles just aren't tuning in tonight. Well, no, it's because you got a weird vibe in the helicopter. You didn't realize it. Your intuition is saying something's not right here because I can't get my goggles to focus right. No, no, no. It's something's out of whack. The vibrations on the helicopter are outside of the normal tolerance that you would fly with.
Wow. So how do you train for that? Is it just
Yeah.
time? I mean, traditionally, is it just time? Like it's time under tension, and those that are able to adapt do, and those that aren't are out. Is it that simple?
Yeah, so I mean, the hardest part about flight school and okay, so I'll go back to my instructor pilot days. Um, I always told whoever I was training that day, or usually the day or two before, look, I can't study for you, so I expect you to know the books when you show up. You got to know the knowledge. I know you can't go rent a helicopter and get better at flying. That's on me to get you better at flying because getting better at flying is a matter of time, right? You got to repetition. You got to do it because you can't just go rent an aircraft and go fly it because flying, you go rent a Cessna and you fly a Cessna. Well, your day job is an F-22. Well, that Cessna drive, you get a little bit of stuff out of that maybe, but in a helicopter, especially like the OH-58, for instance, like just the systems management and the flying skill is not the same as the Chinook. So it's not like, oh, I can go bank a bunch of time flying this cheap aircraft and then go jump in the big one and be just good.
And it's going
No,
to
it doesn't
apply,
work that
right?
way. Yeah, you
Right.
need familiarity with the system. There's no there, but there is no training. There was no training mechanisms, no training tools available other than book knowledge.
Mm. So in again in the Air Force world, there's a phrase that surfaced in a couple interviews: helmet fire. Helmet fire is the term they use when you've hit cognitive overload. You may not even detect it, which is I thought was really interesting. But the other pilot or somebody else on your team is going to detect it and give you a heads up. Is there something similar in when you're
Absolutely.
flying, especially with the 58D?
Yes, no, the helmet fire is real. That is absolutely a thing. A great example. I was in Iraq. We were in really bad weather coming back to our home base or what have you, and we're doing the instrument flying back to the home base. And the unique thing about an OH-58 is it's not an instrument rated aircraft. Most pilots that get into an instrument condition in OH-58 Delta, they either successfully navigate that or they get killed because they're going to crash. It's called inadvertent IMC. It's a bad thing because you weren't planning on not seeing the visible horizon, and now you're in an aircraft that has none of those automated systems to help you
Got it.
keep the aircraft under control. So you're hand flying it, and this is where your proprioceptive system really begins to fail you. You start to get things leans and start feeling like you're going in different positions. But long story short, in this specific event, I'm flying with a fellow pilot. He's obviously in a we're both in a elevated stress situation because we're both recognizing, oh, we're in this thing that kills a lot of guys. We didn't say that out loud, but you could sense it, right? I'm flying the aircraft and I am hyper focused on flying the aircraft, but I need assistance from my co-pilot to properly navigate to where we're going. So I need some indicators that help me fly to that location. And it was just funny because one of our conversations was, "Hey man, uh, you're instrument rated, right? Like, yeah, I'm instrument rated. Okay, I'm gonna need you to do some of those instrument skills. Otherwise, we're probably not gonna land at this airfield." so so we need to get this together, right? And that's the helmet
Right.
fire, right? Like, helmet fire for the guy on the controls because he's hyper stressed and hyper focusing on trying to keep the aircraft in one sector, and then helmet fire on the other side because the guy doesn't know what to do with the button pressing. Like, oh man, how do I set this up? Oh my god, how do I do this? And then I won't even begin uh, to try and break down all of the different dynamics of an engagement, right? So, where's the friendly forces? Where's the enemy force?
Right.
Where's my
Right.
sister ship? Where are all the other things, all the other components? Who are we looking at? Radios. What radio am I on? There are so many factors that you quickly, if you're not inoculated to the stress and you're not exposed to those in hard training, like you have no chance in the moment to catch up.
Wow. Knowing what you know now, and I say that because you've been out of the service now for how long?
3 years.
Okay. So not that, I mean, fairly recent, but you're now working in enterprise. You're familiar with some of the tools that are out there that are like neurotrainer as part of an example where we believe that we can improve cognitive resilience. We believe that we can really train cognitive load. Do you think that's a possibility? What's your point of view now? And if you were given the keys to the kingdom, would you change anything about the training? And would you change anything?
Yeah. So oddly enough, in one of my last jobs in the active service, I was I was a director of aviation safety, and we had an accident with a fatality. And all of the people that were investigating the accident, for the most part, we all kind of agreed. We felt fatigue was a player. We felt it was causal. We had no objective measurement to prove out the causality of the fatigue. Therefore, we couldn't highlight the fatigue. The thing with a with an accident investigation, you cannot assume or like, hey, we really kind of feel like this is the thing. No, it's got to be backed up by evidence. So, uh, one of the things that I was doing in my last little bit in the active service was pursuing technologies to help identify these skill sets or these gaps, these risks. And one of the things that I've really kind of harped on lately, and I believe the military needs to really take a serious look at this, is in the flying world, our machine has tons of monitoring transducers and all these other things. They'll tell you every pressure, every fluid, every temperature, every all the different variations of things about to go wrong in the aircraft, right down to the point one decimal point, kind of breaking thing. Uh, but the point is that the human being is, depending on what statistical bucket you're looking at, it's around 80 to 90% of your accidents are caused by the human. And we have nothing measuring. So between baselining a human training a human to think through rapid decision making and under stress, and then being able to go back and evaluate potentially in the accident sequence, like, okay, this part came apart or this part of the helicopter stopped working. I can see in heart rate variability and all these other different things that, oh, that's when the stress hit the pilot. So yeah, I if I had the keys, and I did for a little bit, but the technology wasn't there. We were hotly pursuing wearable type technologies to baseline and monitor aircrew throughout the mission set, just so we would have a reference point to say, yes, fatigue was it, or yes, stress was it. Technology wasn't there when I was in.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the technology is yet. I mean, full transparency, we're still trying to figure that out, aren't we? Because there's causation and there's correlation. And so the something goes wrong in the aircraft, to be able to have that layer of information about the human might be very informative, but it's going to take a lot of work for us to get to a point where then we could have a strategy for how we would course correct that going forward, right? Because
Yeah,
it's
and
complex.
what's
The
funny
human
is,
is complex.
yeah, one of the things that's interesting is the thinking speed and decision speed needed for aviation, specifically low level, high speed aviation, or just, really all aviation, but low level, high speed helicopter type aviation. Um, you you can't train for it without some tools, right? Like, it's not like you can go out and do jumping jacks and get better at it. Uh, but it is one of the deltas on bringing a guy off the ground level. Like, even if they played a bunch of video games, that may or may not necessarily correlate. But the fact of the matter is, when we were at flight school, for instance, we had a rudimentary a training device where it was a table that was basically on an axis and it had a ball in the center of it, and you had a cyclic that you would move and you try and keep the in the center of the table, and that was to help practice, because one of the most difficult things in helicopter training is learning how to hover. You want to watch something terrifying,
Interesting.
go watch some hovering videos from Army flight school and watch those helicopters look like
Really?
they're about to do each other. Yeah, it's terrifying. Uh, God bless
Okay.
those IPs training that. But the point is this: if there were tools, right, to practice that decision making speed under pressure, uh, would they translate to the aircraft? I firmly believe they would, because those things you only experience in the aircraft. There's nowhere else that you can experience them. So to have that capability at the home station or at some kind of training location where you could do this without burning blade time, um, that would be efficient, right? Efficient and
And
costs.
significantly reducing risk, right?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, if we can take it away from the aircraft, yes, where there's cost, there's accessibility to aircraft, but there's also wear and tear on the human being.
Yep.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
frankly, I mean, some pilots respond better than other pilots, right? And a lot of times
Sure.
one of the risk factors, right? So I think it dovetails nicely into a discussion about risk factors. One of the things that commanders do to mitigate risk in aircrew assignment is they associate high flight time, high levels of experience with a lower risk model, right? So I would take a younger guy who doesn't have all this experience and I'd pair them with an older guy. Well, why is it that that older guy has that? Well, because his decision making window shrinks because he has all of this experience to reach on and make his decisions. So imagine
He's
if
got
you
more
had
reps.
got more reps, right? So imagine if you had a new pilot that at least could go through uh, training under stress, the decision making training under stress. My
Yeah.
my belief is that the time in the aircraft, you wouldn't need 1,000 hours to hit that. Maybe you need 500 instead. And the point is, now you're growing that experience decision making window that you want in your pilot. You're growing it faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely agree. Love to see it and be able to validate whether or not we can really make that happen. You flew in combat a lot, right? Total aggregate of over 2,000 hours.
Oh yeah,
Is that
over
correct? Yeah.
2,500 hours, but yeah.
2,500 hours. That has to take a toll. Did you feel at some point, again, looking at it, I mean, through all the filters, but this is a cognitive show. Looking at it through the cognitive filter, was there a point in that journey where you felt, and maybe it was episodic, like I can't process this anymore, or were you able to constantly adapt throughout your tours?
I don't know if it was I don't know if it was a situation where you couldn't process it, but there you did hit a place where it became so routine getting in the aircraft that getting in the aircraft was no longer like this gee whiz moment. Like every pilot longs to be in the aircraft; they want to go fly. Well, it got to a place where you were okay in the warrant officer world. Sometimes you have a guy that you call a seagull, right? You got to throw a rock at him to get him to fly because they don't want to fly. They're like, I'm over it, right? They just get burned
Okay.
out. We would fly 60 hours in 10 days or less. And typically that's what triggered a mandatory day off. And I mean, in Iraq, we were flying between 100 to 150 hours a month. And what it did was there was a physical toll, right? Just muscle fatigue and back pain and things like that. But then there was a mental toll in the sense of what I mean by you become it becomes routine. Like you would fall asleep in the aircraft. Like that was a common thing.
Excuse me?
Yeah, you would fall
You
asleep in
fall
the
asleep in combat in an aircraft?
yeah. Like not okay, so combat, right? Combat has a fun that's a fun word. Um when you live when you live in the theater, it's all deemed combat, but
Right.
combat isn't combat until the bullets start flying. Nobody's falling asleep with the
Right.
bullets. But
Okay.
yeah, if I'm transitioning across the desert to go to my location where I'm going to perform my mission, many times it was, "Hey man, I'm going to take a nap. I'm passing out." Okay, and you take a nap while the other guy flew you there in a two pilot aircraft, you know, or inadvertently somebody would just fall asleep. They just pass out, and you wouldn't even know micro sleeps was a thing. You'd wake up and not remember what just happened, and you're just like, "Man, what was that?" You know, we had all kind of caffeine and stuff for like doping, basically. Like, hey, we gotta hit this caffeine. Uh, yeah, and then you know you get into other units and they have uppers that they would give you for certain missions if that was a thing, if that was needed. So yeah, no, the cognitive load it burns on you in the sense that you get repetitive efficiency for certain tasks, right? So hey, I need you to get to the fuel page and tell me how much gas we got. Bam, bam, bam. We can make that happen super quick. But then on the other side of the cognitive curve is because you've been flying so much and you don't get rest, you're burned out, and maybe
Yeah.
you can't process things as fast as you normally would. Muscle memory is still working; it's still doing what it
Right.
needs to do, but the critical
Right.
thinking part of your brain is kind of
Yeah, that's a technical term. And
that's right.
what we know, and some of that's also going to be sleep deprivation, and or lack of sleep performance in theater. And what we know is that most people will self-report a higher level of perceived functioning cognitively than their actual performance is. So there's a
Absolutely.
distortion that has to start to show up over time, that probably gets pretty scary, yeah, when you're in theater because you think you're capable of doing something, but you may not actually be capable of doing it.
Yeah, well, you start to do things because you've been there for so long and you're so comfortable doing them. You start to do things that you're like, "This is easy, I know how to do it," but you don't realize you're actually a couple fractions of a second behind in the triggering in your mind, right?
And
And
that's all it
that's when
takes, right?
that's when you hit wires. That's when you misjudge your turn. That's when you misjudge pulling out of engaging the target. You smash the earth and what they call mushing, where you mush through the your own air.
Mushing.
Yeah. So
What is that?
yeah. So if you, okay, so you were talking about distances, right? Um,
Yeah.
so an engagement distance, fighters, they're talking miles out. They find each other and they're doing their thing. Well, in a helicopter, I mean, we used to open our little panel and use the M4 rifle out the door of the aircraft as a weapon system. So yeah. So you got that. That kind of gives you the proximity. So what's the proximity of the kill, so to speak? Yeah, I mean, we're talking 100 meters, right? Or you would be engaging a target. So you come in on a steep angle and you get target fixated as a pilot, especially on a annual shooting weapon system. So
Sure.
you're fixated, you're trying to walk rounds onto this target, and you literally have to have your co-pilot kind of knock you off, right? Like, hey, knock it off and get a break, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise you're just
Yeah. Pull out.
crashing this
Pull
thing.
out. Yeah.
Right. And when you go to do that, if you don't have the altitude and area necessary to kind of fly out of your overzealous targeting, uh, you will what'll happen is in your mind's eye, you'll naturally come further aft cyclic to stop. Like, I got to stop going there, so I'm aft cyclic. Well, when I do that, I start to disturb the air around the rotor system, and the rotor system loses lift, and what it's called mushing. You end up literally falling through and pancaking onto the ground. So the way you get through that is you have to push through it. It's counterintuitive. You have to think it. You have to literally tell yourself, push through this, and you push through nose down, and it gets to some scary close proximities to things where you're coming across the ground or a building, and you're like, "Woof, man, that was close. Almost lost the skids on that," like that kind of thing.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
but it's real, and that's a great place where your cognitive fatigue or cognitive load will end up killing you because you're going to be a
sure.
fraction behind noticing that, and you're not going to recognize it, and you're going to hit the building.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. When you stopped flying in combat, let's talk about that a little bit. Your role transitions. What was that like? What was that like? Because I mean, I've spoken to others in various different roles. You're in this chronic stress cycle, as you've mentioned, that becomes very normative, right? Like, we're used to gearing up, we're used to caffeining up, we're used to hitting the road, whatever it is. Whether you're a gunner or you're a pilot, whatever it is. All that comes to an end. Um, and yet you've tuned your mind, you've tuned your cognition, you've tuned your physical system for that environment. What was that transition like for you?
At first, it was great because you're like, "Woo, I'm gonna take a break." But the second part of that is all those habits that are formed, right? Like bad sleeping habits and what have you, caffeine habits, like those just carry over. But what I did specifically was I left the cockpit to go to the command level to help advise like safety policy, right? So, um, and where that added value was coming straight from the tactical employment aspect and not stair stepping your way right to this higher level, like going straight to that higher level. You had an awareness of what the conditions on the ground were that are critical for the decision makers, right? Decision makers are relying on you to articulate, go down, go see what they're doing, and then articulate it into something that I can make a decision on if it's a policy based decision, or we need to change some of the equipment, get some new gear, different training, whatever the case may be. So what it did was it allowed you to all those years that you spent going, man, I don't know why we have this stupid thing, whatever it is, name your widget. It gave you an opportunity to go correct some of that, right? Like to say, hey,
Let's get rid of that widget. Yeah.
we don't need that widget. That widget's a terrible choice. We need this other widget.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's really what it did for me. Opened my eyes up to a whole different section of the military where how long it takes to get new technologies in, and how on the ground level you see it now. You see it today. Like, I need this capability today. Well, to get the ship turned around to go pick up your widget that you need today, it's going to take years.
Yeah.
And that's the part where some frustration starts coming in that I didn't have before. Before it was just like, I don't know, I don't want to use that stupid widget. Well, now it was like, I want to get them a new one, a better one, and you can't. Everywhere you go, you're getting stopped because of the bureaucracy. Doesn't allow this or doesn't allow that. So the
Well,
innovation
what
was
about that contrast by itself? I mean, you're going from an environment that's so immediate, right? See it, react to it, feel it, react to now the ultimate environment of intention. Now what do I do? So was that, did you find that you needed different coping skills in that transition? Like,
yes.
what worked for you?
One thing that you need to learn how to do is downshift your mind and understand that the people you're talking to don't all have the same perspective you have, right? So immediately you're thrust into this job where uh, where you're used to everyone sharing that experience, right? That you could say something like, man, that was close. And everybody knows what that means. Like everybody knows what close is. Now you go to a different location where people don't know anything about what it is that you're doing or talking about. And if you have this impression of something being close, you got 19 different perspectives of what close is, right? Or definitions of what close is. So in an office setting like that, it changes the way you engage people because you start to realize, oh, they really don't understand what I'm talking about. So I've got to become more deliberate in the way that I deliver this message, more thoughtful in the way that I'm going to craft this message, and then more strategic in what this message is instead of just flying off the handle like, I need that thing, which is what happens in the lower levels, right? The lower levels of the military, it's very much read and react happening in real time. And I need this thing and I need it now. Like, okay, somebody's going to go get it, or we're just going to figure out a way to work around it. But in the strategic levels of the military, like you have to kind of divorce yourself from the emotions of the moment, so to speak, uh, which is hard. It's really hard to be. I start to. I understand now why there is a kind of like a combat arm of the military, and then there's kind of like this other part of the military because when you become so close to the combat portion of the military, you realize how dramatic uh, this change could affect the outcomes on the battlefield
Sure.
in real time for people that
Sure.
were you. So you get a lot more emotionally driven by things where everyone else in that realm, if they haven't been in the combat side of it, they're not necessarily as emotionally driven by it because they don't
It's
have the perspective.
theoretical. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Did you find yourself, and do you still find yourself now adopting, well, two different questions, different, I want to say coping skills, but that may not have been the right term. Different skills, um, cognitive skills. Like, do you meditate? Do you do any breathing exercises? Did you now that are different than when you were actually in theater? Let's start with that question. Is your toolkit the
Um,
same?
yeah, no. So my toolkit. Okay, so first of all, I don't have the feeling that I need to come to work in the same mental like sharpness, right? Like let's say that there were because there are days like when you look at the flight schedule and you're like, I know I'm flying this day, this day, this day. Okay, everything is focused on that. What are we doing those 3 days? We're planning our training flight. We're in the books. We're studying that. We're making sure we understand the airspace and all the things around it. And you are really like you are pre gaming, right? Like it's like watching tape on your opponent kind of thing. Well, now you're in this
Sure.
job where it's like I don't really need to watch tape on my opponent. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to die on the virtual call today. You know,
Wait, I don't have an opponent. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
very. It feels a lot slower. It's I mean a lot. You know, underwhelming. I guess is the word. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You definitely lose all of that edgy stuff, right? Which is why I'm happy that I got a chance to downshift from tip of the spear activities to like office activities and then got out of the military. I think that one of the transitional things that troubles a lot of veterans is when you go from high energy tip of the spear and you go immediately tribeless to this
Yeah.
civilian sector, you're just reaching to you're trying to figure out how to fill that void. And at least
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
making that slower transition from tip of the spear to an office job inside the military, you still have your tribe to help you make that step down, and then you step away from your tribe. So then it's all good. You know, you got a better pathway. But if you come off the roller coaster, man, you're just looking for another roller coaster, and there
Yeah.
aren't any.
Yeah. That's incredibly insightful. Well, and I think that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge that a lot of veterans experience is, as you say, you come off the roller coaster, but now you're home. You don't want to be riding a roller coaster at home. So, but you're still looking for that feeling. You're still looking for that fix, if you will, and that's where behaviors sometimes start to slide in potentially dangerous situations.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
the energy. You just don't get to engage those parts of your brain, right? You've done this
Right.
great thing.
Right.
You've crafted this warrior mentality, this ability and this skill set that's amazing, and you're like, man, I just want to use my skill set, and
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah. And there's got to be a rush to the whole thing. I mean,
Absolutely.
without a doubt, right? Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So now, from theater to instructor to safety, now working in the civilian world. You're really helping technologies. You're now helping really bridge the gap, right, between from from privately held technology companies that think they can support the force. You're helping them navigate and understand that relationship. Is that right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I did before leaving the military, like I said, we had that accident. And that was I mean, if I were to really take it a step even further back, I had my own accident where I realized, myself and our air crew were probably not in a place where we should have been flying, but we didn't have a mechanism to measure it, to say, hey, look, we aren't here. We're not where we're supposed to be right now. We probably shouldn't take this mission. We went out and we took the mission, and we wound up dinging up an airplane. Luckily, nobody got hurt, nobody died, or anything like that.
Okay.
So it's free, stupid tax, I guess is what you call it. But coming back, we all talked to each other, and we're like, man, how is it that we have all this experience? We do all these things. We're super proficient. How is it that we're not, primed and ready to go? Like, what happened? And we started to talk about, everyone kind of felt slow. They kind of felt maybe we were tired, or maybe we weren't, in our mental window to where we should have been doing a combat operation under zero limit, 9,000 feet. So anyway, the moving forward, then I took that experience, and then this accident happens, and there's a fatality, and then it's starting to weigh on me, right? Like, in the sense of, you're the director of safety, like, you've experienced this. Now you're in this place where you can articulate to the boss, look, we should be measuring things. Like, what, okay, Mike, what do you want to measure? Why? Right. So now you've got to take this idea that you're not real sure about, and you want to kind of mold it and craft it into what you need to, what you feel is the next proper level. Well, what happens is you run out of time because the bureaucracy impedes you from addressing the need. Well, then I go away, and the people that come in behind me, they have different motives, right? They have equally
Right.
important motives. They're super important,
Right.
the things you're going after, but they're just not the same. So any momentum that you had going after this thing, if you didn't finish it, it dies on the vine usually. I mean, sometimes guys pick up the baton and, but sometimes they don't, and that's okay. But the fact of the matter is, now what I do on the outside is I help advise companies that are bringing technologies to fill these operational gaps. And one of my roles that I feel that I'm, like, empowered to do is, all right, let's really assess the operational capability here. Why would I buy this? Why do I need this? Why does a soldier need to go through this wicket, right? And if all those are check, 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 then it's okay. Now let's go find somebody in the military that's interested in this. And because now I'm a civilian, I can align with the other GS type civilians, and we can get it on the plate to where, hey, your boss is about to change out. Your new boss is coming in. Can you get me on the calendar with them? Because I want to talk to them about our initiative that we're working on. Make sure we keep the momentum. Yep. Okay. You got to do a little sales pitch or whatever, but you're keeping that momentum through that window, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because there's great technologies out there that they need advising to make it operational. And then there's other technologies out there that the government has bought for some reason that are not operational at all. And it's
So
like,
many. Yeah. Yeah.
why did we buy that?
Right. Right. Um, we're both aware. Memo came out recently out of the Pentagon. Um, really called arms, if you will, from Deputy Secretary of War Peter Belk. I think was the signature actually on the memo that was really asking the entire force to start looking at human performance in a very quantifiable way. I think in the past, this was always dealt with at the various different divisions and branches level. We have POTIF with SOCOM, and the Air Force had their version. It sounds like this is the first time the Pentagon's saying, hey, we need to have a holistic view. We're going to pull it all together. And part of that is the term cognitive readiness, which we both know has been used now for a couple of years. It's now getting to the top of the stack. What do you think cognitive readiness is? And do you think that if we can figure this out, it would help address, for instance, that example of where you guys all felt a little slow? At a very high level, do you think that was a cognitive readiness issue?
I do think it was a cognitive readiness issue. I think cognitive readiness is going to be what needs to happen is we have to establish what are those baseline metrics, right? Um, the human performance people, whether it's called POTIF or H2F or craft or whatever steel, I think the Air Force has a couple different ones. Um, the point of the matter is the Department of War, Department of Defense, has specifically, identify that the human needs to be driven to a certain place to optimize their performance. Okay, so a great example. One of the things that we did, we had a fatal accident in a dust landing, and we used the accident to articulate the need that the human being has been maximized under goggles in a flight aircraft. We need a new technology to assist that human being. Well, this is very similar with human performance, right? Human performance. Well, physical performance has gotten us to a certain point. Yes, we can run faster now, we can do different things, and we can manage the body better. Ultimately, the human being is driven by the brain. So it's time to start addressing how do we train the brain? How do we manage the brain? How do we quantify, decision making and skills? It would be fantastic if we had a technology that could tell us, "Hey, look, I am 13% below my normal operating conditions right now," and what that means to someone assessing risk. Because now you have a situation where you're like, "Oh, I have a known quantity that I am degraded," because no one up until this point, I would challenge anyone who pushes back and says, "No, every time I do a risk assessment, I am evaluating how that person is in their current condition." I would call bull on that in a heartbeat because in my 23 years of experience, never have I seen someone say, we should pump the brakes on here. Everyone doesn't look as though they're fit to do the mission. That is just not a thing that's commonly understood, right? Everyone's 100%. Everyone's good to go. Everyone slept 8 hours last night. Everyone has caffeine in their pocket. We're good. Let's do the mission. But we lack a true measurement. It would be the equivalent of saying everyone looks like they can run 2 miles in 12 minutes. So let's go. But they can't. You don't know that. You've never seen them run 2 miles, 12 minutes. What did they run their last 2 miles in? When was the last time they even exercised? You don't even know, but you're just looking at
Right.
them and you're going, yeah, it looks like you could run 2 miles in 12 minutes. Well, have you ever run 2 miles in 12 minutes? That's really hard to do, especially for a mid 30s or 40-year-old male. That's a tough thing to do. So, similarly with cognition, right? We just look at each other and we go, like, everybody's good. Based on what? Well, an assumed we slept last night or because I know you because you're smart? Like, that's not a metric. Like, that's not real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to be able to input something like that to get to a true readiness. So I think it starts with the science, right? The science talks about decision making speed and those kinds of things. We don't have to invent cognitive readiness. We can just pull from what is the proper application in our use case. So is sports the right world to look at? Uh, or is there some other facet of neuroscience that's already uncovered this? And you start there, and then you adapt and trim it and change it as it's flowing through the system for the different military specialties.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it's important that we don't suddenly assume there's a one size fits all answer to readiness, period. I mean, we how long now have we been looking at readiness numbers physically, right? We've got Aura, Garmin, Whoop. And I talk about this on the show, surfacing sleep numbers and readiness numbers. But to your point, also, if I get up today and I have a mission, now I can't speak to having served, but whether it's I have a mission like I'm going to fly or I'm going to go out, I'm going to kick doors in, where it's I have a mission, there are things I have to do as an executive. And I look at my score and I'm like, oh, my readiness score is, red. I don't care. Like I'm still going to go do the mission. And I'm not going to admit that I might not be able to do the mission. But that layer of intelligence, I think, is going to become critically important because at the end of the day, this is about not just succeeding, but it's about succeeding well, preserving life, and having longevity throughout the entire cycle. Right? We want people
Yeah,
to.
And to your point about, some thought leadership and things like that, um, aviation is uniquely shaped and uniquely positioned to lead on this because in aviation, we already have metrics and predictive layers built into our risk decision policies, right? So you and I are talking about this, and I'm certain there are people listening to it going, I am not about to change the risk level of my mission because somebody's brain test wasn't good. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you wouldn't launch a flight of 5 tonight with a marginal weather forecast unless the mission was
Right.
worth it. And
Right.
that's what I'm saying. We need a weather forecast mentality for cognition. I'm not telling you that the person can't do it. Sure, anybody can do something once, but the fact of the matter is you're trying to manage this person through their career and you're trying to manage an $80 million aircraft. So it's ready to go tomorrow. Is this the right call right now in this current space? Or are there other mitigators that we could do to change the dynamics on this? Be maybe one of those dynamics is I'm not approving you for a 6-hour window, but I'll give you a 2-hour window. You got your first bag of gas, and then we're done. There are a lot of flexible things we could do with it, but to just brush it off and ignore it like, oh, that's not something we can do. We trust weather briefs as though they're written in stone. And there's times where we're sitting on the ground and the weather never comes in and we go, man, we could have gone and done that mission tonight. And there's other times you're in the weather and you're like, we shouldn't have flown tonight. Holy cow, we should have listened to the weather. So that's what I think it's important for
I
the
like
people
that.
listening.
I like that. I think that's a great frame. And I think you're right. I think that flight understands safety and risk in very unique ways. And if we can have a cognitive layer that can serve as, hey, if we can get to as reliable as weather forecasting, we're in pretty good shape. Because you're right, it's never going to be perfect, but it's probably saved a lot of missions and a lot of lives, just to have that layer. And again, we're talking layers. We're not saying it's the only part of it, the final determinant in a decision. It is a factor in being able to make better decisions about people.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
it's funny because if you talk to some of the labs, right, in the military, when they talk about doing pharmacological interventions to keep a mission going or elongate a mission window or what have you, and they're going to give certain dosing to keep people up or down or whatever. What's interesting is what are the metrics that drive those decisions? Because I can tell you what the armies are. The army doesn't have one. There are no objective metrics driving that decision. It is an assumption based on an hours up or hours on shift, and it is driven by okay, how much longer do they need to go? Uh, but it would be really great if we had a capability to where we could start to baseline people, understand people, kind of classify them, not right and wrong, like who's in, who's out, but classify them so that we know when the mitigators are needed.
And then potentially training protocols to be able to address shortfalls, et cetera. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Excellent. So do you still fly?
I don't. I was medically retired, so when you're medically
Oh,
retired, you don't get
interesting.
to fly anymore. So
Okay.
uh,
But even
I don't.
recreationally,
Nope, nope. Can't get a upslip. They won't let that. They're not gonna let that happen. Even all the people I know in the FAA, nobody's gonna do me a favor. It's okay.
have you found a substitute? I mean, I asked because, like, so I spent 12 years on a motorcycle as my primary means of transportation. And then when I got married, my wife and I had a deal. So I ended up getting rid of the motorcycle. I think about it. I think about it every day. Like, I rubberneck for bikes. Like, we'll be out and I'll be like, "Nah, it's a motorcycle going by." So if you're not flying, have you found something that gives you that now gives you a similar sense of satisfaction in terms of that sort of combination of experiences? Or have you just moved on?
Uh, no, physical feeling of experiences. No, like the excitement of doing certain maneuvers or whatever. No. Now I do have 4 kids, so what's fun about that is I love teaching my kids, right? Like I love teaching them how to like I'll teach my daughter how to drive the little lawn tractor, or teach her how to drive the truck. And she's looking at me as she's 11. Like, I get to start the truck and move it around. Like, yeah, like you got to learn how to do it eventually. So let's do it. So I mean, but it's fun because it's the same kind of thing. Because when I was as an instructor, which is the best job in the Army, is an instructor pilot. You're teaching guys. You're in combat and you're flying a guy and you're teaching them new maneuvers and stuff. And you're like, ah, let's push the aircraft. Let's see what happens. Don't worry. I'm your safety blanket. I want to teach you how to do this the right way, so you can do it all
Yeah.
the time, and so you can
Yeah.
really press it. And that's always been one of the things that I've thought about with the cognition and human performance. I love the fact that the WPO is trying to operationalize cognitive metrics because it's super important, but I think it's very, very important that they approach it from a performance aspect and not uh, a no machine aspect, because you got to let people, right? You got to let them get out there and find their boundaries. We used to do it in the aircraft a lot. They'd take it right to the edge on the banking or the speed or the altitude, and they'd look at you like, "Am I allowed to do this?" Like, "Yeah, do it. Let's go." You gotta know, right? You gotta know how this thing works. So same thing with the human performance metrics. Yeah, push the limits. Like, nobody's trying to put guardrails on anybody because, oh, well, now you have a cognitive metric. You can't let anybody do anything. No, 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 no. That is not the answer. The reality is, in a combat scenario, the Navy and the GAO have put out multiple reports where it's like, hey, you got to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep and all this, or 7 to 9 hours of sleep opportunity. Anybody who's been deployed knows you're not getting that. That's not even a thing. So, okay, that's what science says. Good, check. I understand. Now give me something I can do. So hey, here's a tool where you can manage your people on 5 hours of sleep every night, and you can know how to cycle them to give them the right time off, to give them the right windows to keep doing the mission. Because we're going to keep running hard. We're actually going to run harder now that we have this insight.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I love the fact that you got your 11-year-old moving your truck.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
the
course.
takeaway there for me was I think you're right. I think part of what makes being a human being unique and really rewarding is finding your edges, but finding your edges in intelligent ways, not recklessly, but finding your
Yes.
edges in intelligent ways. Yeah. Excellent.
And that's why
Well,
I would teach my 11-year-old how to drive, right? Because I
yeah,
want her to
yeah,
feel
yeah.
comfortable to be like, "Hey, I wanna learn how hey, can you teach me how to do like an e-brake slide in this thing?" Like, maybe, maybe not. Maybe when it's icy one day, sure, I'll take you out there, we'll do some e-brake slides, but not right now."
You have to capture that on video. Well, Mike, as I knew it would be, excellent conversation. I learned a ton. It's really interesting to hear about your experience. I want to thank you again for all your years of service, but also for the work that you're doing today. I appreciate the intelligence and the thoughtfulness that you bring to what you do. It's great having you as a guest, and I look forward to future conversations.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Noah. I really appreciate it. The opportunity, the platform, all these things. We'll keep hammering away on this, man. One day it's gonna break
We'll
through.
we'll keep hammering away. All right, Mike.